Question time, question time. Let's see what this is about here at Taiwan Blend. A very dirty, homeless man had suffered a heart attack right in front of you. It is necessary to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. You know how to do it? Will you do it? Most likely, yes, I'll do it because I'm just a nice guy and I don't want to spoil my record of saving lives. That's all. That's all. I got a record to keep up with.
My hats off to you.
Okay, yeah. I would keep up to. I mean, that's me, man. Because I don't know life, unless it's something really serious. Unless they did something bad to me, I just let them die. Boy, that sounds bad. No, generally, yeah, I'll help. I'll do mouth to mouth.
I would help. But I mean, when you're taught CPR, they also teach you to carry those little kits. In your little first aid kit in your car, in a little packet, and then it's got that. What is it? A dental dam?
They're never around when you really need it. Believe me.
If push came to shove, I'd probably help, but I'd probably have to fashion a cover of some sort.
Sometimes they have the mouthpiece too that you can shove into the throat.
But on the street, I'm not carrying the proper equipment, so.
Oh no! Think about this. With this COVID-19 business now, would you think more people would be less likely to proceed with mouth to mouth? Hey man, this is just something. This is an interesting question, especially at this time.
I think generally people would shy away from that. In my experience, it's kind of say one thing and do another. I've seen it.
If I had the mouth adapter, I would definitely help. Definitely. This COVID-19, Wuhan virus, whatever you want to call it, it's scary, man. Okay.
Oh, I'm sick, and my turn.
Go for it, dude.
I'll take the far one.
I hope you get a doozy.
Set up.
I hope you get a doozy.
After looking for work for 6 months, you get an offer from a large weapons maker. Do you take the job? Yeah, it's one of those tricky questions.
Do you take the job?
6 months, no pay.
Blackwater style, man.
A weapons maker is even higher than that. So I would probably, out of interest's sake, have a look at it and see what it entails totally before accepting the job. If it's anything like totally unethical, like those bomblet mines, the ones that they drop and just kill children who play with them in the place, I'll probably have a thought about it. Standard weapons for like NATO, I'd probably...
And this is coming from a soldier.
Yeah, I would probably justify it that way. Oh, it's for the NATO guys, it's standard weapons, but tricky. Do I have to say yes or no?
Hey, man, it's up to you.
Okay. Definitely not for white phosphorus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh.
All right.
How
White phosphorus and landmines. No.
No. Okay.
Biological weapons? Chemical weapons? Probably not. No. Probably not. No.
Why?
No. Because it doesn't just affect the generation of where I can see the effects. It's got a long-term devastation effect.
So you're talking about Agent Orange, right?
Exactly. That's exactly where my mind went, and birth defects and being a dad myself, I think, just where you're coming from. Kids stepping on landmines or things like that. Things that I wouldn't be able to feel the guilt for because I wouldn't see the repercussions immediately.
That's very interesting. I was buying coffee and my friends tell me avoid coffee that comes out of Vietnam, certain parts of Vietnam because of Agent Orange, and...
I've never given it a thought.
Yeah. Me, this may sound, I'm a weapons guy, and if I could get a deal and if I can control who I'm selling to, 6 months, you mentioned 6 months or something like that. If I would take it for a while, I would. Yes, I would, but it has to be on ethical grounds. But that's also my ethics may not be the same as some other person's ethics. So I probably would.
We're going to change the name of the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, to Lords of War.
No, I just hope I don't, end up like 10 years from now. You said this 10 years ago.
Blend of War.
Yeah, I'm going to have to erase this tape, man.
You'd probably be more of a duke than a lord.
Oops. KK. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Add another cat be in trouble.
Duke of Destruction. Destro. Cobra Commander. I could see you as a Cobra Commander.
Which one?
Cobra Commander. Hey, everybody! We're going to sell some weapons.
That's way out of my cartoon character. Way out of mine.
Here we go. 6 months after moving into your new home, you discover a large stash of gold and silver coins. The previous owner has died. Do you report this to his heirs?
Oh, this got to be easy.
That's my new home. That is my gold doubloons.
That's your bonus.
That is my new Spanish galleon, baby.
That's a bonus for moving in.
That's my new Ferrari.
I'm sorry.
Even if they were ill-gotten gains?
I'm not asking where it came from. I found it in the wall.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
Finders keepers.
here in Taiwan, Rick, if you find it, like I found someone's wallet, right? And the first thing when I brought it to the police station, they were like almost like with that body language, why didn't you just keep him shut up? Because they become responsible for filling out the reports and all that stuff, you know, and waiting around. But
I've had the same experience with a cell phone.
Cell phone, right?
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, this is a brand new cell phone. Do you know that this is a Samsung Galaxy?"
right.
I'm like, "Yeah, I know what it is."
They become a marketing agent. Don't you? This is a new phone. You know, this is a wallet.
But you know, here's the thing. I've always said that if I win $5 million, even $5 million, I'd take at least $2.5 million of that, and I would split that into $10,000 checks. And anybody that's ever done me something good in my life, I'd give them a $10,000 check.
agree.
Because you know what?
Would you like a drink of my tea?
Here's a watch.
I'm still rich. I'm still rich until the day I die.
Well, you know, if I had that much money, I'll still work though. You know, because I'll be bored without doing anything, without helping people. You know, I don't know how people can win that much money and sit on their butt. And that's it. Is that how you should live your life, man?
Oh, I'm not going to sit on my butt. I'm going to be sitting on a beach.
And doing something.
Going
It's like
skydiving.
the story of the Spanish galleon that was found like 10, 15 years ago. They recovered all the gold in the South American countries, said like this, that gold is booty from being stolen from our countries, so please return it. And the world court just said, no, it's going back to Spain.
Well, there must be a lot of cases like, especially with the Egyptian art and all
Well,
that stuff.
hey, Bernie, I got a question for you. You know, like growing up in North America, we've got like Disney and things like that. And then we've got, you know, the road to El Dorado, the paved city of gold, right? And those are based on South American tribal culture and things like that, you know? And I know I read an article actually this morning that says that there's this recent DNA evidence that connects Maori people, which I understand you've got a little bit of knowledge with. Connecting South Americans to Maori DNA. So technically that road to El Dorado could be somewhere down the road. So do you think that there's a pile of Maori gold out there?
I doubt it.
I doubt it.
Yeah,
That was fast.
Polynesian culture never got to the part of as far as like a metallurgy. The Maori culture before colonization was the most advanced Stone Age culture that was found. So they fashioned stone to like high end, like greenstone weapons and greenstone
weapons.
jewelry, greenstone ornaments and stuff like that. A lot of stone work, including shells. Actually, the Polynesians did spread across the Pacific Ocean and got as far as Rapa Nui, but you're right, though. There is a belief that the Polynesians did actually make it to South America, have some contact, but not really like a lot of
Like a major
migration.
population.
It wasn't migration. There may be contact with the islanders, the South Americans, and I've read that some of the language used for like the word canoe between some of the South American cultures on the coast there. The words are very similar to some of the Polynesian words for canoe.
Well, listen to that there, my Canadian brethren that's out there across the ocean. We've got the word canoe, and we've got First Nation people up there. Is there some connection there?
The vessel canoe, not the word canoe.
Okay. Hey, so you mentioned greenstone being a really popular and precious stone from Maori culture. So living here in Asia, I know that jade stones, they're green stones. Is there any kind of connection, relation there?
Yeah, it's a standard kind of mineral that you can find in a lot of cultures. probably it's quite hard wearing. It can fracture quite easily, but it's quite beautiful when you shine it up. It takes a lot of work, especially if you're living in a Stone Age culture. So it's a lot of manual labor.
But do you think that kind of maybe the origin and the appreciation for those two kinds of stones kind of stems from the same area?
It's probably just because the cultures exist where they are. They're probably looking for a media. And greenstone just happens to be there. I don't think there's actually cultural ties from the use.
Okay.
Yeah, greenstone's quite popular around the world.
So when you say Polynesia, like a lot of people are familiar with the movie Moana and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and the part that he played and stuff like that, and that in Hawaiian culture as well.
Yeah.
Right. Where would you say like Polynesians? Where do they originate from? Because we've talked about sailing across the ocean to South America, down to New Zealand as well. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about your knowledge about Papua New Guinea as well. And so where that's such a huge part of the earth. So where do you say the cradle of Maori culture really stems from?
Well, this is a big one because the Maori culture belongs to the Polynesian culture, and the Polynesian culture covers probably 2/3 of the Pacific Ocean, from New Zealand up to say around Tonga, Samoa, and then across to Hawaii, and then down to the East Island.
Right.
And that's a very vast area. Polynesians actually through DNA analysis, they believe started here in Taiwan. Possibly started migrations
The area at least.
Started migrations maybe around 5,000 years ago, and slowly island hopped down through the Philippines into probably Malaysia, Indonesia, and then into Papua New Guinea. Now Papua New Guinea is a Melanesian country, and it's a really big island, and there's a lot of different tribes there. They might be like living in the next valley over, but they'll have different languages.
Yeah, valleys do that.
Yeah, they cannot communicate with each other very well. Spent some time there intermingling with the Melanesian people, and then they stepped off into the Pacific, and then they became the Polynesian people. So they were a mix of people that left Taiwan and a mix of the Melanesian people and moved into the Pacific.
So you've been here for roughly 15 years, is that right?
About 18 years now.
So 18 years. So during your time in the country here, do you see a direct connection, like if you go out to temples or if you go into the forest, the jungle somewhere, do you see some of that Maori culture, some of those specific areas in the country that you can identify that's like, whoa, my people were here?
Yeah, certainly. Some of the Aboriginal art, like some of the buildings they have, is very similar to how we would structure our buildings in the Pacific region. There's a standard a meeting house or a standard like long sleeping house. Possibly the design varies because of the vegetation they used to build these things, but they're all a standard similar kind of. With a big post in the front with a crossbeam and a long sort of wooden structure with a flat wooden floor. They'd have them here in Taiwan, they have them in Hawaii, they'd have them in New Zealand, Tonga, Tahiti. They'd be all over the place, but just variations on the theme.
On the same note, what brought you to Taiwan then? I mean, you've been here, this long. What brought you here?
It was a love story.
Okay, you get the violins out. Just you want some background music? I mean, we can add it in post,
Okay, well, back in the day when I was studying tourism, I had a holiday job, and it was in New Zealand in the top of the North Island, and it was with a tourism operation. They took tourists to swim with dolphins.
Wow. Tell us more about the area.
It's called the Bay of Islands.
I've never been here.
Yeah, it's probably historically one of the most famous regions. It was back in the day when pre-colonization, but they had the whalers coming from Europe. The whalers would come down. They would take the whales. They would kill the seals, take the blubber, and all that, all the good things, and send them back to Europe for a lot of money. So maybe 1820s, 1830s. New Zealand was quite a rough place for crime and prostitution with all these wild men from Europe.
Extracurricular activities, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that was the Bay of Islands. And the place called Russell, was called Kororareka, and that meant the hellhole of the Pacific or something like that, because these sailors were there and they were kind of raping and pillaging a bit, and
Yeah.
the Maori people didn't really appreciate that because it's their country and they didn't want that, and so anyway, that area, besides being then, was very, very rough. Now has been developed into probably one of the most beautiful spots in New Zealand if you want to go for a tour.
Who's doing the most of the development? Is it like coming in from nations like China?
No, well, I haven't worked there for a while, but it was pretty much New Zealanders that have lived there. The operation I worked for were with a Maori family. They were a local family, and they had it's kind of like the permission of the local tribes to actually operate. Yeah.
You said kinda.
Well, I think they were the tribe. And everybody else probably had to pay a fee or a license of some sort to be operating there. There was speed boats, there were like skydiving, all kinds of activities going out on fishing boats.
And this love story, where this come in? I don't want you to run away from that.
Oh, the love story. Okay. Anyway, back to the love story. Well, during my time working on the boat, I met a girl. She was in New Zealand studying. She gave me a phone number.
Wow.
Nothing came of it. I went back to my hometown to carry on studying, and then one afternoon I thought I'll call this girl. And
Make sure you get this right.
yeah, she wasn't there. She was away on holiday, but her roommate was. Mm-hmm. And I was
Okay.
so I talked to the roommate for a while, and we organized a date, and it was an interception by Taiwan, and here I am.
Come on, there's got to be some parts we're missing here. That was a big jump, man. Wow.
Yeah, but there was no like romance going on with the other woman. It was just like she gave me a phone number in case I wanted to catch up with her if I was in Auckland where she lived, which is like 100 miles from Hamilton.
Oh, that's in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah, so by chance I just happened to think, well, I'll give her a shot. I'm coming up to Auckland sometime. And I met her roommate instead.
Wow.
And sparks flew, and we had a relationship for a few years, and I came up to Taiwan after she graduated, and yeah,
Happily ever after.
That sounds like a good story. Yeah, I see that ring. So you got some little ones, huh?
Yeah, we got a couple of kids now.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm curious about a lot of things.
So they're mixed. So
we got that.
yeah, I'm mixed and they're mixed. So
Mixture there.
yeah, so their mum's Taiwanese, but her family speaks Taiwanese as well. So the kids are kind of trilingual, but their Mandarin is much, much better, of course. English is okay, and they speak maybe 3 or 4 or 5, 10 Maori words, because we don't really converse much in Maori. This is a shame.
Oh,
Why is
a
that?
shame, man. Yeah, exactly.
Why is that? Oh, well, I was never brought up bilingual. I was brought up speaking English. And when I was at school, there was no opportunity to learn Maori.
So was it outlawed? Because I know here in Taiwan, the
Yeah,
history
back
is
in the
that
day.
Taiwanese was outlawed
Yeah, you have to
for a
pay.
long time.
Right.
And so it's only recently, even in the last few years, that I know that they're bringing into kindergarten
Yep.
situations or preschool situations and starting to teach kids
Used to find-
Taiwanese
yeah.
books.
Back in the day, you used to find kids for speaking Minanhua, in class, Yeah, and I think it was the same like,
I think maybe probably more like a beating for.
Whoa.
Yeah. So the kids turn up, they had their real names, and they said, we're not saying that word, it's too hard to say. You are now John, and you are Mary, and you are Robert.
Wow, that sounds like my dad's upbringing. He went to a Catholic school. Catholics really destroyed the First Nations people where I lived. There's a huge, horrific history with those guys, right? Even down to my dad. My family is First Nation in Canada as well. And my dad was left-handed, and they beat him on his left hand until he became right-handed. Yeah. So now, where I grew up in Nova Scotia as well, we have a huge whaling community, or had a huge whaling community. We were pirates and shipbuilders and mercantiles and all that kind of stuff. And you mentioned earlier that whaling was a big part of New Zealand history as well, and that the English had come in and really change that area, right? So let's talk a bit about that, because I understand that there's a thing that I've heard about before called the Treaty of Waitangi, and tell me how you feel about that.
Yeah, so I think about the 1820s when the whaling situation was getting quite heavy. The chiefs of New Zealand petitioned Queen Victoria, I think it was, to actually ask for her to send over representatives to control this rabble that were over in New Zealand. And I think wires got crossed, and they sent some ambassadors over and fashioned a treaty saying that they would protect the Maori, but the local New Zealanders, from these rapscallions, and they would become subject to the crown. That was the English version.
That was the English version. You said version. Okay,
Yeah.
there's got to be more to this.
Because there was a translated version, which was the Maori version, which said that the tribes would have their ultimate authority over themselves.
Oh, lost in translation.
Lost in
I see.
translation.
Now, the thing that really struck me was, correct me if I'm wrong, but the original treaty was signed by over 200 chieftains.
Yeah.
But then eventually it came down to that it really represented like 20. Is that correct?
I'm not sure on that fact, but they still include all the signatory names on as far as what they talk about with the treaty.
Okay.
They haven't excluded those other names because there were so many copies of the treaty going around New Zealand at the time of
When
the
you say
signing.
copies, you mean versions?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
and there would probably be Maori versions, which said to these chiefs that we're going to be operating in New Zealand, and we're going to guarantee you to have your rights over your own land and your dominion. And so these chiefs, that's good. And then the treaty also said that they would take care of the lawlessness going on in the country with the.
I have a question from the way that people see it right now. It feels like they would see this as some kind of portrayal, right? Of different versions. They must be in their hearts, But then sometimes you have to look at some relationships between the language and the purposes of the people. Now, what I mean is sometimes it's hard to take a translation of something in a language that has such a complicated legal system and translate it to another language which does not have that concept. Things are going to get lost. It must get lost.
Sure. Of course, like Polynesian culture is mostly communal living.
Shake my hand. That's the deal, right?
Yeah, that's the deal. So the land belongs to the tribe, and there's no individual.
Now, I have a question in regards to that, because I know that in European history, really, if we're dealing with sovereignty and sovereigns, I should say, that really only a king can address a king and a queen can address a queen. So let's say that the Queen of England sends her representatives to New Zealand to pass upon her word and try to instill her reign on the people. Would you say that, I know that you said communal living and there's a lot of chieftains involved in stuff like that, but I would assume that the queen would only officially recognize one as the true king or queen of the Maori. So would you say that was put in place, or that was
No, I think the chieftain title was quite respected by the crown, by the British.
Why?
Initially.
Why?
Because
it's a badass, right?
Yeah, because we're badass.
No, I mean, come on, he must have been a really strong dude. I mean,
I think because New Zealand was so far from Britain that they probably thought they couldn't manage the resources of actually dealing with, having to send so many emissaries across to talk to everyone. So they just recognised the few chiefs that managed to get over to the UK to have an audience with the Queen.
I can understand that, because back in that day, to send people out to that far region, it did take a lot of resources, a lot.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
we don't mention that,
and they might not even make it there. They could die at sea.
That's right.
What's happened a lot.
Yeah. So eventually, like the confusion with the treaties was eventually like when the settlers started arriving in mass, they started to ignore the treaty.
And that's about what
on both versions. They just ignored it, and they started occupying land, and they started to
What, free for all?
they started to agitate with the landowners, and then just create trouble, and then maybe start a war or whatever, or fight, to actually have an excuse to take the land as a,
Okay, this is
punishment for fighting with the crown.
this kind of sounds quite familiar. I mean,
I have another question.
Yeah.
They're talking about war and settlers and, Polynesians. What we're saying there is that Maori people were settlers as well when they first came. Now, I've heard through a little birdie on my shoulder through the trees that before the Maori people arrived in New Zealand, that there was a group of little people, little red-haired people that had settled in the region. Have you heard anything about that?
I've heard of gaslighting.
Let's go with this.
Yeah, I think it's. I think some people in New Zealand resent the fact that they're living on stolen land, so they make up stories to justify their own theft of land.
Because this sounds familiar, especially to First Nation people. You have these visitors come over and they try to claim that we're going to make this country great again, and we can't allow these people, these outsiders, to come in. And where the native people are asking, when are you leaving? I mean, that's rough, man. And how do people back home? Before I continue, please forgive me if I screw up on the pronunciation of the Maori words and languages, because I don't like to. I'm really, man. That embarrasses me.
Okay, no problem. I'll help you.
Yeah,
fine.
But this kind of things have become more systematic racism, being raised and stuff like that to the people. I mean, we can talk not only to what's happening to the Maori people and the Aboriginals in Australia and stuff like that. I mean, can we go into that a little bit? What do you think? I mean, because that's really sensitive, man.
It sounds like the treaty situation really had a deep impact on the future of the Maori people, and those settlers, like you were saying, they actually never left. They never went back home. They stayed.
Then they increased the numbers. Yeah.
How does that affect where we are now? Is that a deep-rooted wound that's still festering, or has there been some sort of give and take there?
There's kind of a bit of give and take, but the historical part I want to talk about is like Britain had a whole series of governors going from South Africa to Australia to New Zealand, and they were pretty much the Queen's rape and pillage representatives. Guys like Grey, he'd already worked in South Africa and Australia, stealing land from the indigenous people, and presenting himself as the Queen's guard, the Queen's representative, and that was just systematic from Britain. The problem with what they did with the English version of the treaty is they gave the Maori people the rights as British subjects and all the rights that involved with that. So they were actually part of the crown. So they were as British as the settlers coming over.
Okay.
The problem is they were brown and they lived on the land that the new settlers had. No one really picked up on this.
This is just a SOP, standard operating procedure to each little area they jump over into.
Yeah,
and
that's
that's
right.
scary.
So is that still happening in your opinion?
No,
Or persistent.
no. There's no more of that agitation to steal land. That doesn't happen anymore because they pretty much took 99% of the land.
Bam.
What about Papua New Guinea?
PNG. Oh, yeah. Papua New Guinea is a huge island just north of Australia. There's two halves. One half is Papua New Guinea, and the other half is West Papua.
Right. Papua.
Yeah, and I think it was called Irian Jaya once upon a time.
Yeah, I heard this.
And Irian Jaya used to belong, along with Indonesia, to they were part of the Dutch sort of settlements. So they came under Dutch rule. Around the end of the 1950s, Holland decided they really couldn't operate in that part of the world anymore. So they started to make plans to actually start pulling out and giving autonomy back to the indigenous people living there, or the Asian people in Indonesia, and the Austronesian, Melanesian people in Irian Jaya. So they gave autonomy back to the Indonesians, and then they organized with the Irian Jayans to have their own government, which will take them time to set up.
How long ago was about this?
Around 1960.
Oh, so we talking about real recent then. Okay.
And in the meantime, well, as soon as they did that, the Dutch moved away, and then the Indonesians saw Irian Jaya and decided that they wanted it, and they invaded.
Oops.
Yeah, so they invaded. The Dutch protested. There was fights between the settlers, the new settlers moving in, and the army, and pretty much the Stone Age people that lived there.
That was about 86 or something like that.
No, this is the beginning, back in the 1960s.
Oh, okay.
And so they pulled back. The Dutch organized with the Indonesians that in 1 year's time they'd have a referendum with the West Papuans, because the West Papuans had already made a flag, they'd already started building their own government. But of course, the Indonesians were there already, so they'd moved in. So they said, okay, in 1 year's time we'll have a referendum, and the West Papuans will vote whether they want independence from you, the invaders, or if they want to have their own full autonomy and grow their own government. And that was ignored for 7 years. Nothing happened. By that time, a lot of transmigration coming in. And from Indonesia, 7 years later, they had a vote, and it was called the Act of Free Will. Or Act of Free, I can't remember the last term.
What a name.
Yes, and of the 1 million people that lived in West Papua, 1,000 were given the vote. So after 7 years of Indonesian rule, the Indonesian authorities knew who to
I mean, this
intimidate.
is real. This is not like just for the name.
To intimidate. Let's not miss that word.
Yeah, so they were voting under threat of death for them and their families.
So at gunpoint.
So the West Papuans, the 1,000 people, they lost their land through this, and it was all engineered by the UN as well, and John F. Kennedy around that time as well.
Engineered by the UN.
Yeah,
there's so many things happening recently, and I'm wondering why the world has been asleep on this thing, man. And
well, one of the biggest copper and gold mines in the world is in West Papua, and it's been operating for 40, 50 years now. And they've basically removed a whole mountain and built a mountain-sized hole in the ground, and they've removed tons and tons of gold and 30 times more than in copper.
So
selective amnesia.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Bernie. Why do you care about West Papua New Guinea?
Oh, I kind of, I feel that they're family.
It's in the hood.
Why is that? Why is that? It is just geolocation.
Well, the history of Polynesia, we come from that area. We came from Taiwan. We spread down through those areas there into PNG, West Papua, and then we set off into the Pacific. So I look at these people, and I can see some of my family faces when I look at those people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I you take a shine to or something. You guys are here in Taiwan for whatever reason, and I've had the same sort of thing when I've traveled through Africa, and I've looked at I know some of the history of what went on there, like in South Africa and Kenya. Colonization, I've never approved of it. No one really wants to be colonized.
That's right.
Why would Papuans vote to be colonized?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just unjust, and it's really they are the people that own the land. They probably belong to the land, but they're being like the poorest.
So now we've talked about the war beginning in 1960s. That was really the turning point, right? But let's talk for a minute about what is happening now, today. Why should we care about West Papua New Guinea right now? That has really changed since then. Has it ramped up? Are things more dire? Are people really in need of assistance more now than ever? What's the situation?
Well, the situation is that the West Papuans are losing their land, they're losing their forests, they're becoming sort of stateless within their own country. There's been a lot of bloodshed going on over there in the last 40, 50 years. Some have actually had to go across the border into Papua New Guinea itself and live as refugees off their land. Yeah.
A lot of this is really new to me. Because obviously because of what's happening in the United States now and BLM and COVID-19 and all that stuff. But what what the hell are we doing? What I mean is, are we doing anything to face this part of the world that people are not thinking about? Do you see anybody who's taken up any position to get things moving to help these people, man? This is their damn land.
It is their land. The same with like in Sudan, right? It was going on for decades. The raping and pillaging from the people from the north going down and stealing the oil and killing the villagers, and we needed George Clooney. They need someone who's famous to step up. And I know Leonardo DiCaprio, right?
Mm-hmm.
He does some stuff for Native American and South American stuff as well. He made a speech at one of the award shows.
He reminds me of Marlon Brando in this case, in many cases. And
Why is that?
Because you remember when Marlon didn't take the award for The Godfather. Mm-hmm. He sent a representative, and I forgot her name, and the Academy didn't appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. No, I remember that. Yeah,
but he stood up. He said maybe it wasn't the best thing for me to do, but we got it out there. And now I have a whole different view of Marlon Brando now. Because of this and other tiny things. But he was eccentric in a way that I prefer someone to be eccentric with.
Yeah.
Well, hey, James, I know that you and I have talked before about we've shared the opinion that this doesn't seem to be a localized issue. We spoke earlier about my family being First Nations, and things really get destroyed in Canada. We've got thousands upon thousands of First Nation women that have just gone missing with no investigation, no care given into that whatsoever. I think maybe you're touching on that with Leonardo a little bit, right? So, but this seems to be a worldwide global issue that there's people around the world that are suffering. They're having land that are taken away. Colonization is a big issue. We talked about the UN engineering, land destruction, land reclamation, or clamation, the opposite.
Based on premise that comes from another powerful nation.
So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, he's the highest paid actor in the world right now. And I feel like now is a time, compared to when I was a young kid, that Maori culture is starting to become prevalent. I mean, look at your shirt right now. You're wearing an all-black shirt. And in Canada, rugby is not even a huge sport for us. We come from the land of ice and snow, but I know who they are, and I feel like Maori culture is just starting, or not starting. It has been more prevalent in the past few years. Even celebrated with movies like Moana and things like that. So how do you think that Maori culture is really different than other cultures, like First Nation people, my people?
Yeah,
and how are they able to preserve their culture?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I've read a lot on it. And I think probably because they were staunch defenders of their land as best they could. But when they lost that, they still defended their culture. So they were able to pass it on to the following generations. And even though we had the colonization, the school system set up by the British and the Catholic Church, we had the same problem with that. There were still staunch advocates for preserving the culture. So we've managed to keep it going. The other thing, we were fortunate by, the distance from the colonizer, because the UK was just so far from New Zealand. It would take them a lot of effort to send a lot of soldiers over and quell the issue. I think the settler government kind of realized that after a while, and then they just decided to tone things down a bit and not follow through with what they had done, like in some places in Australia.
But use another way of
total eradication. Yeah,
use another usurping type of technique.
Yeah,
that.
Plus, they did need labourers for all the farms, right, and all that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up The Rock, because there's word out I've been hearing is that maybe Rock is thinking about going political one day. And I know it sounds weird, but we'll see, because a lot of...
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah,
because what?
Hey, man.
His daddy is from my home area in Nova Scotia.
Think about
so
that.
Rep to my boys from
LeBron
Nova
James
Scotia.
bought a media company. Got a media company starting up.
That'd be cool.
So these little tiny things. But this is the thing, and you mentioned something that really, kind of bothers me because I have a classmate that also is a Native American, and I mean, you look at him, he's Indian because he preserves even his physical appearance, the way he dresses, and he talked about his sisters just disappearing, you know, and that really bothers. I mean, you feel sad for people like that, and this is happening back in your home, I'm sure, in many situations. And what are we doing?
We don't have the crime of people disappearing like that. We have the crime of a lot of family violence,
Gangs.
yeah, and gangs and inter-gang wars and stuff like that. I can't comment on the disappearing of the women, but it goes to show that maybe the Royal Police, Mounted Police, don't have the will to address.
Well,
it.
here's the
You
thing.
think so?
Here's you know what I feel about the police. I mean, when there's air cadets. Have you ever heard of air cadets? Or they're basically kind of like Boy Scouts, but for the Air Force. And the military's got them, and so does the RCMP in Canada as well. So I joined that, and that was kind of like my future where I envisioned myself as growing up to be an RCMP officer. Because I grew up from a history of rescuing kids from domestic violence and things like that. They came to live with me, but the thing that really I felt really disillusioned once I get to know a lot of those people personally, because when we talk about family violence, oh boy, that's a real big issue, even in terms of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or I lived in America as well.
It's that big.
There's definitely a lot of that kind of thing going on. But I really felt like the thing that really disillusioned me was the amount of situations that I've seen people go in and they're just like, well, we'd love to help you, but it would be a little bit of work, so we'd rather that you sort it out yourselves. And I left with a real bad taste in my mouth, and it felt like, because I grew up with like ancient history and things like that, and I had a real big appreciation for castles and kings and queens and knights, and I felt like even today, the only difference between a castle guard in those Game of Thrones times and now is just the equipment that they use. I feel like that's and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, really that says a lot in the name in itself.
We have a different image of the Canadian police in the United States. They're cool there's cool speakers. They don't get excited. They're very polite.
They're human.
That's the key.
Yeah, it's quite surprising that recently with the Black Lives Matter. You see some footage from Canada of people getting beat up by the police, and you think, well, usually Canadian police, they're portrayed as being very kind of placid, but kind of authoritative, but calm about it. Right. Not over the top sort of people. So you saw some of that when you were there at all?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, living in the States, I had friends that they were female friends, and they came home crying one time, and they had said like the police rolled up and they saw us in high heels and told us to walk down the street slowly in our high heels so they could watch us do that. And I can't really connect with that in Canada. I haven't seen like that kind of twisted, sick mentality, that brutal authoritative force, but there is definitely egos involved, and I think going through high school and things like that and seeing some of my friends join the army and some of them go into the police services and things like that, like it does take a certain kind of what they would say, like this alpha mentality, right? It does take a certain kind of person who seeks that, but then there's people that represent that in a positive light, and there's people that they really get the ego boost off of that, so like humans are fallible, and just like any other job position within the banking system or a healthcare system or something like, there's the saying goes like absolute power corrupts absolutely.
For real,
right? So I did see that.
I'm sorry, because I come from I wore a uniform to protect people also. I'm lucky, I'm lucky that I didn't have to deal with screw ups like that who took advantage of the citizens, and I've been in some tight situations. But yes, I've seen some troublesome situations with fellow officers and stuff like that. And now with all this stuff going on with the police and the indigenous population or the minorities, it hurts me a lot. It makes me want to just revert into myself and stuff like that. And you military and all that stuff. How did that affect you in any way? Being in the military for as a Maori, and which is the majority of people. But how did that change?
You change as you grow older, right? When I was younger, I was kind of oblivious to the system being sort of set up for white folk. Mm-hmm. So I was just existing as best I could. I thought it was just the way it was, and when I was in the military, I was like, well, okay, I want to try and keep New Zealand safe. And if there's some Māori radical trying to start a fight, if I get ordered to shoot him, I'll shoot him. Well, yeah, I can't believe I thought that back then. Mm. But the more you learn, the older, as you get older, you learn more, you read more, you understand more, you talk to more people, and you find out how rigged the system really is. When the settlers came to New Zealand, they created all the systems, all the institutions. They set up the government, they set up the councils, they set up the laws. And if you wanted to get into whatever, you had to get voted in, and you had to have backing from people that would help you. So they took care of their own. Yeah. And left the indigenous as they were.
Every nation has a version of the Coast Brothers or something like that.
So I'm really curious about this gang violence that you're speaking of as well, in terms of Maori gangs. The things that through my travels around the world, I've heard people categorize people of certain cultures, right? Mm-hmm. Africa in particular, where a lot of people that I've heard, they really believe that that's a tribal culture, and because it's a tribal culture, they're always at war with one another and that kind of thing. And I know that historically Maori people were tribal culture as well. Maybe not the same, but you could describe them as tribal culture, from what I understand. Would you say that the gang violence is reflective of that, or would you say that it's more of a anarchy kind of movement, or would you say that it is like cold, calculated killers, or would you say it's more like a yakuza triad kind of situation, or what we have in North America with like the Hells Angels and the biker gangs and that kind of stuff over there? How would you categorize that?
Or simply just economic disparity.
Economic disparity, possibly like the Hells Angels, just brotherhood. They're just looking for brotherhood, and they probably came from families that had land in the country, and because they lost land, they were forced to move into the city, so they lost their tribal links. Mm-hmm. So they were living in the city as sort of like dispossessed Maori, and they had probably trouble getting education finished, and then trouble finding work, have trouble with the law, so they've probably been put into jail when they were young or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they found brotherhood through studying gangs, and really the gangs they in New Zealand, the Maori gangs, they're nothing like the Asian gangs. They're not that high level. Let's import some, methadone or cocaine from South America.
Oh, so drugs. How bad is the drug use there?
Well, they've got more sophisticated lately since people started producing meth. Mm-hmm. So there are some Maori gangs that actually participate in that and distribution. Prior to that, when I was a young kid, it was probably just like marijuana. Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's not a drug, man.
Well, it was a heavy drug back in the 70s, so it wasn't legalized. It's probably still not legalized now, I don't think. Maybe going down the path like Canada and the US, where you can use it for medication. Mm-hmm. But the Māori gangs were pretty kind of amateur when I was a kid, but they were quite violent as well. So if you mess with them, they would deal to you.
I know that in America, we think Māori gangs are like really bad. I mean, like they'll cut you out. I mean, they'll cut you up right in the middle. That's what we thought. Probably because of movies, that's possible. I mean that's probably the reason, because it's like exotic. They have the tattoos and everything.
I'm curious because you spent time on the force in New York, right? And I grew up under the assumption that there's definitely like boroughs and hoods in New York where actually some of those gang members have turned their life around and tried to help their community.
Quite a few, yeah.
And there's also some government funding, from what I understand, to try to go in, maybe not a lot, but to try to go in and try to set up some community centers or some help centers to try to turn people's lives around. Have you seen that kind of thing in New Zealand?
Yep, it happens. Like a former gang member, like probably rose to the top, became the president, and turned his patch and gave it away, and became a youth leader.
Stop, patch.
Patch. Oh, the gang emblem on the back of the jacket.
right.
And that's a big thing.
We call it the colors back in New York. And the black pearls that hand your colors.
Yeah, so the same thing. Give up your patch means you're turning your back on the gang, and they become community leaders.
That definitely sounds like motorcycle clubs. Yeah.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of convincing for the authorities to believe that this guy's turned a new leaf. It does happen. It does happen.
But how much of it that you see money going into the community is just a pacifier to put in the mouths and say, yeah, we are doing something, but you guys, you need to, put your boots on and put your strap your pants on and do things.
I can't think of any money coming in for that sort of thing. It's just policing.
Oh,
Yeah,
flat out.
Yeah.
Talking about new money coming in and settlers as well. I've heard that, especially with the COVID situation right now, that there's a lot of new faces starting to appear and new bunkers starting to appear. Do you know anything about that? I've heard names like Peter Thiel.
Oh, yeah. Billionaires. Yeah. It probably started back in the 80s when Princess Diana got married to Charles. And apparently their escape plan, if nuclear war ever happened, was they would all fly down to New Zealand and sit there and wait it all out. And
the rest of us fight it out, huh?
yeah, and New Zealand was seen to be a safe haven because if there was a nuclear war, it would be the last place to be enveloped by the clouds.
So that's why they're hiding from COVID.
So do you think that there's any new money coming into the local communities from that kind of situation?
Oh, it's hard to say. Some of these guys bought their land at really bargain basement prices somehow through New Zealand government, through connections. And yeah, it's quite dirty. They got New Zealand passports without actually having qualified. More dirty politics. And New Zealanders don't like that. But these guys, they're just taking full advantage of the people that they can buy. So New Zealand does have some corruption. Apparently it's on the scale of being one of the least corrupt countries in the world, but that's probably relative to the rest of the world, right? We don't know. We don't know. I don't think much of that billionaire money is going back into the communities. They're buying up little islands like around Auckland and making them secluded. But like our friend from Facebook who bought the place in Hawaii, and he's prevented the locals from walking through his land, which they had been doing for thousands of years, to get to the beach to do whatever they needed to do.
Oh man, that sucks.
Yeah. So another form of colonialism. Yeah.
Talking about millionaires and billionaires, what about Mike Tyson with his Maori tattoos?
Yeah, I mean, how much influence is that when you, as a Māori, and you see Westerners, maybe it could be from anywhere, using the symbols from your culture that people from where you come from may feel this inappropriate and stuff like that. I mean,
cultural appropriation.
Yeah, but I don't think cultural appropriation is always bad. A lot, in some cases. But I mean, what do you hear from folks back home? What do they feel about that?
Oh, I would have appreciated if he'd gone to New Zealand and got a Maori tattooist to do it rather than just a brother.
Oh,
it would have been much, much better. We don't mind.
I didn't know.
Yeah. Okay,
so now you're blowing my mind here, because I've been hearing cases where if a lady was to put on a teapot, like the traditional Chinese tight dress that the Chinese people wear, if the Chinese people see a Westerner wearing it, it's like, oh, you're honoring our culture. But there's this SJW back home that's, oh, that's culture, but you shouldn't be doing that, blah, blah. I remember the day when I forgot who was this actress who got long braids, or Bardot, I forgot her name, but it was a big news in the black community, and I couldn't see. Well, she likes the style. Let her wear it. So your culture is not, people from back home.
I think where people get upset is if you start making money out of using those designs, or you start representing yourself as doing the Māori tattoos, and you probably aren't Māori, or you haven't studied how to do it in New Zealand.
Right.
You don't have a tutor that's actually taught you how to do it, and the proper customs and whatever goes in behind the tattooing process. Or even like artwork, nobody wants their artwork to be ripped off, and a lot of that does happen with all cultures. So I don't mind people paying homage to it.
Homage, yes.
Yeah, but when they start, like some people stealing designs and making T-shirts and then advertising them on, and that's my friend's design, and that guy in Vietnam is making money out of my friend, but not giving my friend any money,
Copyright.
Yeah.
Because talking with some friends over the past few days, James included, the question came up like, with cultures that are really ancient, like Maori people. Some of that stuff really from us outside looking in is really spiritual and really has a deep connection to people's honest beliefs and systems. So is that, do you see some of that bastardization being reflected? For example, like Jason Momoa, for example, going to the Oscars and doing a haka or something like that. From what I have come to understand is that that's a very special dance that's really for very special times and things like that. Do you think that popularization is kind of bastardizing things, or do you think that bringing out Maori culture into all aspects of life like that in the celebrity profile is a positive for sustaining the Maori culture or promoting it?
Yeah, good point. With the Māori culture is like if someone is going to do a haka, they have to do it properly, and they don't mess around, they don't laugh, they don't joke about it. They have to put their full effort into it and believe in what they're doing. So for him to do a haka, and him being part Polynesian too, it's not a problem. It would, even for James, if he wanted to get up and do a haka and put his full heart into it and do it properly as best as he could, there'll be no problem with that.
Okay, what do you mean put your heart into it? Now, here's somebody who, every time I see a haka, I admire it so much because it gives me a feeling of seeing people work as a team, as a group. And, it's like me running track and field, being with my teammates. I'm going to run the last 100 meters until I fall on my face. But what do you mean put your heart into it? I mean, how spiritual, because most people see only the physical aspects of it. They don't understand the facial representations and what is shown. What is this? Put your feeling into it. What does it mean?
That's right. So a haka is, if you're going to for an event, like for a sporting event or pre-colonization, if you're going to war and pre-battle, if your haka was good enough and it intimidated the enemy, they were like, oh, these guys are serious. Let's just pack up and go back to where we came from. So... and on the sporting field, when it comes to that sort of thing, if you give your haka, you don't give it 99%. You give it maybe 120% because that means that you are here to do a job and you're going to do the best you can. I'm going to mess that person up if they want to fight with me or deal to me on the sports field. They're going to lose.
I'm going to assume that, yes, you've done haka. How did you feel when you get into that trance? Because it looks like when people are doing haka, they're in a whole different being, a trance, right? And on another end, because we have a First Nations brother here, a lot of the things that you see, like the callings of Indians when they go into battle, from what I saw in television or read in books, it's almost like a haka in some kind of pre-war display, basically.
Yeah, and a psych up thing, right?
So tell me, what emotional state did it put you in?
Oh gosh, you're almost...
I know, man. I'm an outsider, man.
Well, if you come off a haka, at the end of the haka, your skin's supposed to be bleeding from slapping and tearing at your flesh. That's how much you put into it. And when you do a haka properly, you probably lose your voice at the end of it.
Well, if I see you pulling out your flesh, I'm not going to mess with you.
Clawing at it.
Okay.
I cut my fingernails tonight, especially. So
get him a cab and get him an Uber and take him away because
during a haka, when it starts up, you're just getting into a rhythm and you're building it up, and you can feel the adrenaline coming up to you, and you're supposed to gesticulate and make yourself look as ugly as possible. You stick your eyes out and you give guys the evil eyes, and you poke your tongue out to make yourself look even uglier, just to intimidate people, and you scream in unison, and you're slapping and you're stomping your feet, and it's just hardcore. And you finish that haka, you're almost wiped out.
Yeah. I mean, there's no game to play after that. I mean, I can't imagine something. I mean, we have music and stuff like that, but this is at another level, man.
Psychological warfare.
Yeah.
Psychological. Well, if someone is scratching themselves up and bleeding, that's a little bit more than psychological. I mean, there's so much that a person like me especially a fellow brown or dark person, and we see something like this, and we see some kind of correlation in some ways, when you get that kind of energy and you display it, but it's like letting out some frustration sometimes.
Yeah. Well, a haka is also for can be used for a greeting, and it can also be used for a farewell, like at a funeral. So the haka would be still staunch and strong, but probably less of the tongue, the fearful tongue poking and the eye poking out and stuff like that. But it's just like a tribute to the past person who's passed away.
Didn't we, Pat? I think we had a discussion, something about cultures displaying part of their cultures to people who may not understand it. And you see situations where people say, "Oh, these people, they're Maori. Hey, can you do a haka?" It's like, what? I'm not a switch. I mean, I'm not a battery operated toy.
No. Yeah,
that's really hurts, man. You can't just come up to that. And there's a lot of other good things from your culture that I like. Some of the food.
You've had some food?
Not yet. Somebody, I'm not going to tell you who. It's our producer over there who's told me some stuff about some Maori good food there.
Yeah. Actually, next week I'm going to be cooking some Maori food.
Like what?
We're doing an earth oven, which is called a hangi. Actually, the word umu and hangi is also used in Papua New Guinea, Western. Those cultures there, they use the same word. So it's an earth oven where you dig a hole in the ground, you light a big fire, you heat up some stones, put the stones in the hole.
Any type of stones?
Special volcanic rocks that they don't explode when you heat them up. So they retain the heat as you put them in the ground. So put the food on top, all covered up, with whatever, leaves or foil these days. And then with the meat on the bottom and then the vegetables and the tubers on top. Seal it all up again with dirt and put some water on. Before you seal it, you put water on and it steams it all up. And then put the soil over the top, you stomp it all down, and it's just like a massive pressure cooker.
Sounds like it takes a long time. I know, right? Sounds like it takes
I'll tell you, it is delicious, because actually Bernie and I met at a hangi.
Oh.
And so I had the honor of being a part of that, and it was...
Oh, I'm jealous now.
It was a belly-busting, finger-licking, eyeball-rolling, salivating, delicious good time with a really great group of people, I can say that as well.
on this, huh?
So,
Yeah, sorry, James.
Does that take a long time? Because you had to dig a hole, and who does in the traditional culture? Who digs the hole? Like the females have to do this all the time? Or?
No, I think it's the man's job. Yeah, we just
I'm glad to hear
get
that.
a couple of six packs and sit down.
So it's kind of a global thing where the barbecue is up to the gents.
Yeah.
Set up the kitchen. I put the meat in, and okay.
Well, in Canada, we'll barbecue at minus 27 degrees Celsius.
You're Canadians.
Minus
That's
20.
nothing to your Canadians.
Oh, yeah.
You get a New Yorker like that now.
We've got a 24-pack of beer called the 2-4. We put that outside right beside us. It's a natural refrigerator, and you keep yourself warm in your shorts by the barbecue. Good to go.
Oh, a sacrifice.
That's yeah.
Anything.
That's
boys will do anything to drink beer. Yeah.
It's not a sacrifice when you get the first cuts of meat. You get the best cuts of meat.
Okay, I got it.
So the preparation would take maybe an hour or so to dig the hole and maybe stack the fire. Also, you got to go and get the wood and get that ready. So
Is that any
a couple
type of
hours
wood?
on top of that.
Is it like because wood adds flavor to the food?
It probably, as long as it's not treated wood, it's like
Pesticide.
from like a building site where we don't use that for railway.
So
sleepers.
with such a labor-intensive process, what would you say? It's not going to be every other weekend that you're going to pull this thing off. So what kind of special occasions would you say that would be for?
Gatherings, like for weddings. Hui, which means like meetings. Like
Hui.
Hui, which means like we maybe the parts of the tribe come together and they have to discuss something. So like a hui, they'll have like a couple of days. End of the thing, have a hui, have a hangi, but not every day. Maybe at the end they'll have a hangi.
So being here in Taiwan, let's bring it back there for a minute, and seeing and being immersed with the Aboriginal cultures that are over here as well. Would you say that you've seen some of that kind of culture here as well? Or has there been a connection there so far?
I've heard they do some small version of it, not like a great big thing that we do would feed like 150 people or whatever.
Yeah.
They have like a small, like maybe one family hangi, which is maybe a smaller version of, with a smaller hole, maybe one meat fashion, and then with the vegetables, maybe one person, one family meal.
Right.
So the Polynesians and the Melanesians from the PNG area and all across that, they all do their own version of hangi and umo. So it's probably started here on a small version, but just got on a bigger scale as they move south and out towards the east.
So we have a huge influx of Chinese settlers. We had Japanese settlers. We had Dutch settlers here in Taiwan. You're saying that, Polynesians first originated here, and you're here now, obviously.
Yeah.
So would you say that there's been a connection, that there's a bridge that's being built at the moment to try to recognize and bring those cultures out in the people that do still reside here, and trying to, because what I see is that the Maori culture has done such a fantastic job of preserving its culture, but living here in Taiwan, it seems like the local languages are disappearing, the local people have been splintered from their communities, and I feel like Maori could really share some of their preservation techniques to those people, or try to help them rekindle that fire. So is there anything that's going on to do that at the moment, or would you like to see that?
Well, there's a growing close connection between the New Zealand Māori and the indigenous people of Taiwan. In Māori mythology, when a Māori person passes away, their soul leaves the body, goes to the top of the North Island of New Zealand, or Aotearoa, and it leaves across the ocean for Hawaii, which is the start point for of the origination of the Maori people. So
where is Hawaii?
That's right. This is just the mythical land that we started from, and I'm pretty sure that Taiwan is really our Hawaii. DNA tests prove that we actually did sort of exist here maybe 5,000 years ago. So,
which is not a long time ago. Come on, 5,000 years ago, history is not a long time
not
ago.
a long time ago, yeah. And look at some of the indigenous folk here. They look Polynesian. Some of them, I started talking Māori to a guy because he had an all black cap on, and he didn't understand me because he's a local indigenous guy. And I thought, wow, man, that was freaky.
Have you run into similar words like these?
Yeah,
local between Ame or something like that, or Sansao.
Yeah, some of the numbers when you're counting, they're very similar. Maybe one or two sound slightly different.
The pacing.
Yeah, and further on, like in Indonesia and Malaysia, some of the words are very similar to the Taiwanese and Filipino indigenous folk. They're very, very close to their languages, and even like the words for fish and death, all those kinds of things, they're very similar. You could actually probably understand.
Wow.
Hey, so you said you wanted some help with pronunciation. I think for our viewers at home, Maori is a very foreign language for a lot of people in the English-speaking world, for sure. Here in Taiwan, we've got 8 different tones for Taiwanese, 5 different tones for Chinese. What would you say are some tips to be able to pronounce Maori words? Or are there some simple Maori words that, here in Taiwan, if I say it speaks a little bit of Taiwanese, even more than Chinese, people are like, whoa, my mind is blown. Is there something that you could share with our viewers at home that would really help them out with their pronunciation, or really try to impress some people that might be in their communities?
We need a drum roll for this now.
The Māori language is quite simple, but because there's very few sounds. Like our alphabet is probably only 13 or 15 letters long.
Wow.
Yeah, the vowel sounds are very simple, a bit like Italian. E, o, u. No A, no E. There's not so many different vowel sounds. So, and quite a little bit similar to Japanese as well. E, o, u.
Or
no
A-E-I-O-U?
E, o, u.
And we say yeah. So
And no S.
no S.
No L.
Oh my goodness.
No J sound. So there's lots of sounds that are cut away, and there's no tones. no tones. So biggest thing is the R sound. It's like a Scottish R, like a R.
Gahra.
R.
So is that
Not a
tone-
R, not a R.
Now it is. Today, it's the first time in years that I had to speak Spanish today. And it was like, I couldn't get my, So,
Arriba.
yeah, arriba. But it's interesting. I mean, how do you feel about not being able, at least at the current time, to teach your children this part of their language? It's got to be rough. I mean, they speak in Mandarin, Taiwanese. They hear.
Or do you ever bring them home to get them in touch with their roots?
That's cool.
Yeah, we have gone home to meet family and stuff. I put my kids through school for a few weeks on their holidays. They did a couple of immersion classes when they were at school and learnt some basics, but it takes time to actually build up all these sorts of things, and I do feel guilty that I haven't done enough for them.
Hey, so one of the things that I really respect about the Aboriginal people in Taiwan that I've come to know is that, and I feel that the Taiwanese community here shares the same feeling from what I've gathered speaking to them as well, is that they really know some things that are lost. And I was thinking about this today. Like, there's some devices even from the 1800s that you and I would look at right now and be like, what did they use that for? But for centuries or even millennia, that was just common everyday items that they would be used to. So, but there's a lot of skills, I think, that we can appreciate in the Aboriginal cultures that we're just like, wow, that is entirely useful even in today's environment. If you went camping or if you wanted to build a house, there's some really significant techniques that I really wish that were more prevalent. Like, I would love to go to those people and really study with them for a period of time. Would you say that there's some things that Maori people could share?
Sure. Because Māori people were communal, they did a lot of farming. They did a little bit of hunting and fishing. So they knew their resources and they knew not to exploit them. Maybe originally they had, but they'd learned techniques to actually prevent that, so that they could exist within the limits of their environment. And that was the clash when the settlers came, because the settlers came, the colonists came, they wanted to start farms, so they chopped down all the trees, they got rid of the birds. Now, New Zealand was famous when Cook arrived. He just said the whole island, when you could hear the birds 20 miles from the land, you could just hear the birds. It was so loud, and if you go into the forest back then, it was just bird song. It was just deafening, so much bird song.
Yeah.
And you go to the forest now, it's quite...
So can you give us some specific examples that maybe that maybe our viewers at home wouldn't be aware of? Or maybe some research points that they could look up on a Wikipedia somewhere?
It's kaitiangatanga. So it's like not overexploiting, having only certain periods when you can take things from a certain area, having a rahui, which is like when maybe they've noticed there's some sort of algal bloom that appears. They just say, okay, we're not going to go here for 6 months, and they'll make sure the whole community knows that no one's going to go there for 6 months. It's got to.
So is that like the red tide?
Similar, yeah.
There's also history behind that too. When you don't have a concept of culture that can import things, you spend more time on maintaining the things that you have.
Yeah.
So therefore, you don't have you have to think about, we can import this. No, as with the people who came from outside into the nation or in the area in the Pacific, just had that kind of export-import type of thoughts. But what do people back home at that time do to relax or to enjoy themselves? I mean, the environment sounds wonderful.
Yeah, well, they did have sports. They probably had kind of like fishing for recreation, or maybe hunting for recreation for the guys. They had their own versions of like little stone games like marbles, maybe tic-tac-toe, whatever, those kinds of things.
But your guys are really known for what?
Rugby.
Oh.
Yeah, and they had their own kind of indigenous version of rugby, which was like played in a small space. Maybe like 3 or 4 guys against each other.
Oh, I want to hear more about this, because I
don't know nothing about rugby.
I know South American cultures, they got quite deadly at times.
Oh, well, we didn't get that deadly. It was just for, maybe for like, building yourself up for battle,
Okay.
So like wrestling over a ball with your friends and trying to get the ball somewhere to a certain point.
So you saying rugby was kind of like pre-war workout preparation for up to the next step? Then you go.
Well, it was their own kind of small version of rugby. Rugby actually came from the UK, from England.
Oh,
Yeah. So the Brits brought it over, and we'd already had this kind of game going on. So it's just
and
like,
you got better at it.
yeah, it's on a bigger scale. It's on a 100-meter field, so with more guys. So
I'm not American, but I've grown to appreciate the training regimens that baseball players go through. And I think in terms of professional sports, that's one of the most respected sports for the amount of physical training that's involved. And I know that the All Blacks are just killing it out there in rugby for a very long
time.
Other than genetics,
Yes.
what's the secret?
Those dudes are big.
What's the secret?
it was one of those bonding, uniting things within the small communities around the whole country. Every small town had their own little rugby club, and it was like a focal point for those communities. So the farmers would all get together on the Saturday. They'd have a game. The women would give the meals. The kids would watch. Maybe have a little game themselves. And it was a good chance for the community to meet up and bond, and then maybe have intercommunity like games, and then just got bigger, like inter communities, and then provincial, and then we got so good that we had a national team. New Zealand was quite boring, so there's probably nothing else to do except for farm and train how to play rugby.
But I mean, rugby is one of the sports that's played all over the world, And I
Anytime.
teaching kids and stuff over the years and spending times with young ones, I've always said, like, if you want to be a basketball player, I mean, genetics plays a big part in, how tall you're going to grow and that kind of thing. But the biggest thing that I can say is, like, if you take a kid who lives in the projects and he's not going to school and he's not going to daycare and he spends all his time on the court, and he's playing 7 days a week, as soon in between breaks, or maybe skipping school to go to the court and play. But then you got this kid who's only playing on the weekends or on a Saturday or every second Saturday, and he wants to grow up to be a professional basketball player. I mean, that's quite a big gap in the amount of, they say, like, Wayne Gretzky, for example, one of the greatest hockey players of all time, they said that the thing that separates him and the great NHL players is, like, a lot of those kids get like 5,000 hours on the ice, 5,000 more hours on the ice compared to other kids. So they've got opportunities, right? So that's the same thing with, basketball. You put the time on the court, right? So would you say that, being a part of that community, that's what it sounds like. If you're getting the communities together, getting aunts and uncles together, we're doing barbecues and stuff like that, it sounds like they're getting a lot of game time in, right?
That's right, and a lot of good pointers from senior people and stuff like that. It's evolved now to, like, the sport became professional in the early 90s. So then guys would actually could make a living. Yeah, and then guys could make a living from it. Before that, guys were representing New Zealand, traveling the world for getting $20-30 a day.
Exhibitions.
And representing New Zealand and winning. Had to take time off from their own work. They're like farmers or accountants, doctors.
Now, I've heard about this legendary game between South Africa and New Zealand. Do you know anything about that?
Oh, there are lots of legendary games between South Africa and New Zealand. Have you got a time frame?
There's one specifically that was really racially motivated, to the point that I believe that there was a rule that said that certain people couldn't be on the court, but then because they were so respected for their abilities, they were classified as a different race of people.
What?
Just so that they could play. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Please, I never heard of this.
Yeah. Sporting ties between New Zealand and South Africa were very close. They are. Rugby is a massive sport in South Africa and New Zealand, so for us to play them is it's a huge thing. But especially back in the days of the amateur games, we got invited to go to South Africa. Maybe I can't remember, it was the 1960s. New Zealand had a multiracial team. We had, we had Māori guys, we had Pacific Islanders, we had white guys in the team, and South Africa had apartheid back then.
Yeah.
And
sorry, what's apartheid?
Oops.
yeah, apartheid is a system that was set up in the 1950s by the
white majority.
the white majority. Well, actually, they weren't the majority.
Oops.
Yeah.
James got slapped.
Yeah, the people who ran the government in South Africa.
Yeah, that's
because that was just a way of
thinking America.
solidifying their existence and being the rulers of the government of the country and set up the systems to organize the economy and have everything working how they wanted it. So they didn't share power with the people that were living there. They actually oppressed the colours and the black folk that lived there, and they actually had a system called apartheid where you were classed on the colour of your skin, whether you were white, black, or coloured, and there was Indian, and I think Asians had a different classification, but it was pretty close to being white.
Oh, yeah.
And what was the
Miscellaneous.
timeline for that? 1950s, you said?
I believe it started around the 90s.
Ooh, and it sounds so relevant today,
Still
doesn't it?
Yes. It's still recent relevance.
So tell us about this game.
Well, the games went ahead, but they did. South Africa made up a rule where they had it wasn't a new classification. They just said these guys can be honorary whites.
Honorary whites.
Honorary whites. But there had been tours previously where New Zealand were told to leave the brown people behind. They couldn't come to South Africa.
By brown people, you mean Maori.
Maori and Polynesian, yeah.
Boy, history is a bitch.
Yeah. And the rugby union back then would say, okay, sure, fine, we'll go without them. Because they were just so...
Who won?
Enamored. Well, it wasn't New Zealand. Yeah, it took New Zealand till the 1990s until they won a series of tests in South Africa. Pretty hard to play when the referees from that same country back then.
Yeah, it's coincidental. Now, you big in building up rugby here in Taiwan, right? Right. Well, of course, that's what I'm. Hey, Bernie. Oh, the rugby guy. Oh, yeah, I know him.
Oh, yeah. So that's my passion. I got here 2002. Did nothing for a couple of years, just work, and I was thinking, I'm going crazy. I need an outlet, and I discovered the rugby expat team.
So they were here before you got here.
Yeah, they were here before I got here, and then I discovered rugby was actually happening in Taiwan.
Who laid that down?
I think the Japanese did when they were here back in the early 1900s. The Japanese, they love the game. They love the game of rugby.
Yes, they love the All Blacks. The Japanese, they love the All Blacks.
The All Blacks go to South Africa, to Japan for a lot of promo stuff, and a lot of All Blacks go to Japan and play in the competition over there.
Yeah,
for some good money.
Yeah.
So I joined the Baboons. Got my sanity back. Hung out with some guys. It was good. I branched out and started playing with some of the other teams, the local teams. Got to meet some of the other guys there, and discovered that there is a good base of rugby in Taiwan, but it's just kind of dwindling away slowly. Like I mentioned once, it was kind of been dying a slow death for the last 40 years because. Around the 1980s, up until the 1980s, when it came to military here in Taiwan, rugby was the sport. It wasn't baseball, it wasn't basketball, it was rugby. So the guys from the 1970s, they still play now. They're all old guys, and they were back when they were young men. They were the stars.
They were
of Taiwan.
lightnings, huh?
Yeah, they were the stars of Taiwan because they were in the military. They were playing rugby. They had intermilitary matches, got televised.
Or expat community.
Taiwanese, yes.
Taiwanese,
yeah.
There's a school, I forgot, a high school here. I got to bring it up maybe in another show, that it's been very strong at rugby. It's one high school. I hate it, but I'll bring it up next time I get it back. It's a high school, and they breed high schoolers to play rugby. Basically.
Yeah. I think that's Jianzhong.
Yeah. Really?
I think it's the number one boys' school.
Rick, I've been hearing this.
Yeah. You can get a rugby scholarship to play rugby in Taiwan.
I did.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah, and you can get rugby scholarships to university as well, which we don't even have in New Zealand.
Oops.
Yeah.
I've never heard about that in Canada either.
We got to get some more Maoris over here to play some.
Well, that's the plan. That's the plan.
So how have you been promoting this?
Well, what we're trying to do is build up the game in Taiwan and get it more professional. It is kind of run at a sort of I don't want to be critical, but like on a part-time basis.
But at least it's still moving.
It's still moving, yeah. But so we want to get it to be operating on a level similar to New Zealand.
Wow.
Now, are you getting any government funding towards that?
No, not yet. We have a plan. We've got a partnership developing with an academy in New Zealand who are willing to come up and share some of their resources and talent.
That's good.
Yeah. So we're working with a group called the Crusader Academy, International Academy. And if you know rugby, and if you know the Crusaders they're probably the world's best rugby team on the planet, and probably one of the most successful sporting franchises in the world from results.
Wow, that's cool.
So on that note, hey, out there in YouTube land, we've got some people here that want to play some rugby. I know there's some fans out there. We need some help. Come on over. Help us out. Let's get this thing going.
Is there a URL we can find your group at, or please?
What's our website? www.tumaz.com. Tumaz.
Spell that out.
TUMAZ.
Okay.
.com. Yeah, Tumaz.
So cool.
So we're going to form a team eventually called the Tumaz. But the academy wants to come over here and help train local clubs, kids teams, universities, train referees, help set up the administration properly in Taiwan to get it humming, like how New Zealand is, and probably on a smaller version. And then get some guys pathways to play professional rugby.
I've tried rugby here on some of the night games, and the only thing I thought about is when I got the ball was just to run, because I did not want to get hit by these. You probably know Mark. Mark. I don't want to get hit by Mark.
No, because he's big and clumsy.
Big dude.
He's big and clumsy.
So I know. Just say, James, you get the ball, run. That's it.
Oh man,
that's all I did.
I remember that there was this legendary video in my high school. We had this big guy named Chris in our school.
Every school has a Chris.
Yeah, every school has a Chris.
Chris.
He was the biggest guy in our school, man. And there's a video where he was down in a scrum, right? In tight with everybody, and there was somebody from the opposing team, this little guy, and he started running, and for some reason he jumped up in the air, feet first, slid across the backs of the people that were bending down, hit the guy right in the face, and boom! His nose exploded, and he had to go for reconstruction surgery.
That's violent. What a way to come down to this.
Caught it
like
on
a Bollywood
video.
movie to me.
Oh, yes, that's right. Sounds like a dance and like, boom. Isn't that the Bruce Lee flying kick?
Got it on video.
Oh, wow.
Well, it's time for us to get out of here right now, but it's been great. I mean, I don't know anything about rugby, so this is going to cause me to learn more about it. And I haven't seen you for years, but I'm really glad that you took the time to get out here. And also, Kyle, I see a lot of things in common from First Nation people and Maori people. So, we all four seas one family in some kind of ways. That's what I think.
Well, Bernie, I really want to say thanks a lot for spending your time with us and coming in and sharing your experiences with the people out there in the online forum and with us as well. And we'd love to have you back again in the future for sure. And once again, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
No, it's been no problem.
Thanks,
good to
man.
catch up with you guys and meet up again and talk about my favorite things, food and rugby.
Yeah. Food and rugby. I know you said food first, man.
Yeah, so I'll be glad to come back whenever.
Great.
Hey.
And thank you guys out there in the online world, YouTube, North America, Antarctica, Santa's North Pole, wherever you may be. Thanks a lot and tune in again.
Peace.